Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, I am very excited to have the author of one of my favorite series of all time, Brent Weeks. He is here, and I'm helping him promote the newest entry into the Lightbringer, The Burning White. I'll put a high-quality image up as well, so the glare from the window doesn't make that atrocious. And we are going to be talking fantasy, general chat, just see where it goes. How you doing, Brent?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm in the phase of my writing life where I'm shifting into like doing this marketing stuff, which is weird for me because like to be a writer, most of us are kind of introverts, and it's like you have to be able to work in like this dark cave, seeing no human beings, and not very many people can do that. But so after like 3 years, they sort of pull you out of your hobbit hole, they shake the dirt off of you, and they put you in front of a camera, and they go, now be good at this, and it's like people, these are humans. And so there's a little bit of a mental switch that has to happen that, well, your fans can judge how good I am at doing that. So,
Well, already, I have so many questions about the process you're in currently because it's fascinating to me. I was amazed you even had time to sit down and talk with me, to be honest, because I know this book is coming out soon. You are in the middle of marketing. I'm assuming you're going to be doing some kind of tour here as well.
It looks like it's going to be a West Coast tour, and I just kind of, it's not because I hate Canada, like people keep asking, why do you hate us in Australia? It's sort of like I go where they send me, and they're like, these cities kind of like you for whatever reason, so we're going to send you there again. It's kind of like, can we also? No, I just go where they send me. So,
Gotcha.
so I'm eager to get to see some fans that I've seen before, and not remember their names again. But I get to see a lot of airports that I've seen before, which is fun.
Gotta love flying. Has it ever gotten to that point where it's just a complete routine and you're on autopilot until you land?
It's not. I wish it were, but it's sort of this. Again, it's the introvert thing. It's like you go and I meet 100 to sometimes 200 some strangers in a night. I talk to a lot of people. I have to answer questions off the cuff and try not to come off as a jerk, which is a real struggle for me. And then it's like I go to bed. I'm usually super amped from what I've just done, but also exhausted. And then I have to get up early the next morning and fly and find the hotel and try to find someplace to eat while you're doing all this stuff. And then you repeat that. And like the last time I remember, I had a couple days where we had early flights just because of connections or whatever. So like I get to bed at 1 o'clock and get up at 4, and you do that a couple nights in a row, and you are just not in prime condition. So they're like, "Hey, Brent, come out drinking with us," and it's like, no. So it's I mean I don't know how musicians do it. Like I think of
Drugs.
Oh yeah. That actually is probably the answer. That is probably the answer. So yeah, I mean I get it a little bit. Like I remember sorry, just to go tangential because you said that's okay. Like I remember reading about what was it? It was like Motley Crue or some band that traveled a bunch, and they had the rider, right? And in the rider they said, I only want brown M&Ms or something. And everybody was like, oh, these guys are such jerks. These like, imagine some guy sitting there going through a bowl of M&Ms and picking out everything except the brown ones. Like how more stuck on yourself can you get? And then later I heard that explained to me as being like, that wasn't them being pretentious or just being so full of themselves, so arrogant. That was a systems test. That was, I'm sending this 20-page rider that has all these electronic technical specifications. I need to know that things are where they are. And if I walk in there and they don't have the bowl of M&Ms, I know that they didn't read it.
So it's quality control.
It's quality control, and so you can instantly know, or your manager who goes on ahead of you can instantly know they screwed this up. They didn't read any of it. I need to check everything here. And if you're a musician, I mean, if you've got lights, and you've got this and that and the other thing. Like everything needs to be in place, and if those things aren't in place, it's like your life just gets horrible right away. And I kind of get that after, like I said, when I travel, and I just travel for a week, maybe up to 3 weeks is the longest I've ever done. It's like it takes so much energy from you if you go to a place and there just isn't the things there that you need. You're like, where is my person? Like I'm supposed to meet somebody, and I get there and there's nobody there. Like now I'm calling all over, and I'm calling, somebody has to find something. Like it can be a little scary, actually. So I kind of get it, and I'm totally in awe of musicians and people who can just actually do it day in and day out. It's like I have to gear up for it, but I mean, I can't complain. It's like, oh, I get to go, and when I'm on tour, it's like people who kind of hate your books, they don't show up.
Yeah, the fans are there. There's no one there to hate on you.
Yeah. Your haters aren't there. It's not like Facebook or Twitter. Hi, I'm just here to poop on you, Brent. No, it's people who are kind of excited to see you, and that's really weird. After, like I said, most of my life is spent, you struggle with the page, and that work doesn't change, no matter if it's the first time you're doing it and nobody cares, or you're worried nobody is ever going to care, or after having done it for 12 or 15 years. That is the majority of the life that I have. It's like sitting down, working with characters, figuring out a scene, figuring out what went wrong, and so I love that, and I love getting to share it with people. So that's exciting for me, in all the stress. Yeah.
Well, that brings up an interesting perspective here. So you've been doing this for about 10 years now, maybe a little bit more, roughly.
It's been 12 years that I've been published. Okay. So the Night Angel books took me 6 years to get published.
Wow.
So I was working full time. I was the house husband, and my wife worked the day job. And I kind of, I made her breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Here's your box lunch, dear. And she'd go off, and then while she was gone, I would write the day away. So I've been doing it sort of professionally for 12 years, and sort of been writing professionally for 17.
So that gives you that tells me you have a lot more stamina than quite a few authors. There's a few who after 4 or 5 years, they're just, okay, I've passed the check, I'm done. So you've been around for 10 years. You had to have seen some really significant changes to this fantasy community, the way social media has hit it and impacted it. Mm-hmm. Now, that must be an incredible perspective to see this rapid change in growth, the Game of Thrones explosion and wave. I mean, these have all happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's been kind of amazing. Like when I first launched, like I had to have a forum on my webpage. It's like, oh, people need a place to talk online. And blogs were a huge thing. And that was how we shaped the conversations were shaped socially on blogs. And now it's like, do people still go there? And they do, but it's just, Goodreads has just cannibalized a bunch of that. And Facebook has cannibalized, a lot of the social media space. And, there's conversation on places like Reddit and stuff, but it's like things are different now. And one of the major things, which came up with Evan Winter, the author of Rage of Dragons, right, who you had on, is you have self-published people just be able to switch over. And I think that's awesome. When I was when I was writing, I would have people, it took me a long time to get a book deal. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, man, I feel like what I've written here ought to sell. Like I feel like this Night Angel thing could do all right, but maybe I'm that crazy guy because I couldn't get past what felt like the gatekeepers. And right. People ask me, hey, have you ever thought of self-publishing? And the Kindle was out, but the Kindle cost like $450. Like the only people who bought that were just very few people. And the quality of stuff that was on there was not great. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And if I had to do it now, it's a different world. And I think that's really great. And I'm glad that the stigma against self-published or hybrid publishing is mostly gone.
There's still people who are going to turn their nose up at anything they possibly can because they makes them feel better. But there's this shift towards self-publishing. There's this shift towards, you can blow up on Reddit. You can have one of the bigger booktubers review your book and make a bunch more sales. You can have even just something like Goodreads, where you have a few hundred reviews, they're all 5 stars, and suddenly you're in tons of these recommendations and things like that. Has any of that affected you? Or, because from my perspective, it seems like your growth as an author has been very natural. It's been very, okay, you kind of just steadily achieved greater and greater success, which was really interesting to see. This guy who's kind of, I'm trying to think of the correct metaphor here, like the person who just like put in the 9 to 5 as an author. You broke your sweat and you've kind of climbed the ladder.
Right. I feel like it's been complicated for me, because once you get published, it's kind of terrifying, because instead of I mean, even when I first got published, 12 years ago now, or 10 years ago now, it's like you think, I will have people to do a lot of this promotion for me, and instead it's like, no, here's another job. Like, and by the way, now you're under contract, please turn in the next book. You're like, I'm figuring out how to run a web page. They want me to blog, and if I would do a blog, it would take me 6 hours, to do a blog post. And it's like, well, no, I'm not going to blog. I have to figure out how to use all these different social media channels. I have to figure out what's worth my time. There's just a million things you have to do. And so it's sort of terrifying. And you're like, for me, what I have done is I've said, look, I need to handle as many of those things as I can. But the most important thing for me to sell the books is to make the books as great as I can make them. Mm-hmm. So I haven't traveled nearly as much as a lot of my colleagues have, because I'm like, that's days I'm not writing. And so it's like, boy, I feel like I'm missing out on all these things, but like I can't do all the things and write. So I've really focused on like, okay, I'm gonna do this other series, the Lightbringer series. Like after Night Angel, people, I feel like people are like, really? We just wanted more Night Angel. Mm-hmm. and that's a little scary, right? You're like, okay, but me just turning out the same book was kind of felt like an artistic death. I was like, I can't do that. I'm gonna do this Lightbringer thing. I want to do something that's different. Night Angel kind of really started with this kind of a medieval Europe feel, which is kind of great because it allows you to hop right in, tell a story really quickly. You don't have to do a ton of world building to have people get it. And I wanted to do this sort of pseudo-Mediterranean. I wanted to do a different time period with, guns and magic all together. Guns, swords, and magic all together sounded really fun to me. So I want to do something different, and I really focused on the writing and winning fans over to like, hey, I can do more than one thing. Hang with me. So I hope that the success has flowed out of that. But I want to ask you, because you're a booktuber, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is a thing, and this wasn't a thing very long ago. And am I right? You've just you've made the transition to doing this professionally?
Yes, that transition happened a little over a week ago. I'm still terrified.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's still a very experimental part of YouTube. I'm not entirely sure it's sustainable. I'm doing my best, but it's been quite interesting. And from my perspective, sitting here, I feel like my biggest threat is I'm convinced within 5 years, part of every new publishing deal is, oh, and we're going to run a YouTube channel for you. And they'll make the lore videos. They'll make the things. And those are a lot of our bread and butter, is the deep dives into these things, which if that happens, great. It's a natural evolution of the process. But I'm convinced in the next 10 years, you're going to get a call from Orbit or whoever, and they're going to tell you, we need you to start YouTubing.
That's terrifying, and I'm going to tell you from my side. Let's see. Yeah, I can say all these things. Most authors are not amazing TV personalities or YouTube personalities. Like, it's a different skill set. Even like, I remember before I was a published writer, I never went to book signings. And then I started going to some of them because I'm like, I need to do these things. I don't know what to do. So I started going, and I would see people whose books are really good, and I would think they're an amazing writer. Like, clearly they're just an amazing communicator. And I would go, and they would be a boring speaker, just boring. I mean, and you'd be like, oh, and you can't do voices at all. No, don't do that. You just make it look worse for me. So, and I will say, I got to go to this. Hachette is like the overarching company that owns Orbit Books. All of these book companies they're like multinational conglomerates. People call them the Big Five because these 5 companies own all the little companies that you've ever heard of.
Right.
So I got invited to be like one of the speakers at one of the sales conferences because everybody who does sales, they need to sell, who knows how many hundreds of books every year to all the distribution. And so I mean, I don't know why they invited me, but I got invited, and I guess it was Orbit's turn. So okay, you could have another writer. So they picked me. And I will say that the people at the top generally are pretty darn good. So, but that's a few people. I mean, it was like Hachette. One of the divisions of Hachette was producing a book by Brett Baer, right? Fox TV guy. It's like, well, obviously that guy's going to present really well. But the number of people who can really do this, especially do it consistently and do it in a high quality way that's friendly for fans and is honest is tough. I think YouTubing is an interesting thing. So I'm a little curious to explore this with you.
Sure.
One, I was looking through some of your reviews because I watched a couple of them. What do you do when you read a book that you think because I've struggled with this on Goodreads. I'll read a book, and most books are mediocre, right? Like, that's the definition of mediocre. And like, but I am an author now, and I like run into these people. So if I read a book and it's not very good, I'm like, this is a guy who's just trying to, or this is a lady who's just trying to make a living, and this is their first book. How do I, even if I hate something about it, I don't feel like I can go and like crap on their dreams. So I have real trouble being honest. So I end up like, my Goodreads thing has very few books, or like if I have something negative to say, I'll say it about J.K. Rowling, but I won't say it about somebody else because she's not going to see it and it won't affect her. How do you approach giving a negative review?
Well, there's obviously a bit of a difference. So if I'm reviewing someone who's on the top level, I'm completely unfiltered. I'll go to the largest extent.
Yeah.
I get approached by 2 or 3 self-published authors every day who want me to review their book. I can't. My whole entire life would be reading self-published books. So my default answer at this point is pretty much, if I come across it naturally, great, I'll review it, but I can't go out of my way to. So I never feel like anyone has asked me to do something and then I'm turning around and crapping on their entire career.
Sure. Okay.
But every review, no matter how negative, I try to frame in a very like, I'm almost talking to the author and here's what you need to improve way. Because I want it to be taken as critical feedback. I want you to do better. And I don't think there could ever be a review so negative someone's actual career is ended. Because I've also said many times, I am always willing to give an author another shot. I mean, because, the same person who wrote, I think it was like Hangover 3 or something like that, wrote Chernobyl, the HBO show. Like, so different minds produce art of just, you can never really predict it. It's part of the human condition. Art can just be completely random. So I've just accepted that, and I hope that, as I continue to say, always be willing to give an author another shot. If I do end up just destroying someone's book by saying, hey, it's the worst thing I've ever read, I've never actually said that, I don't think, but it can still be just taken as that is critical feedback. Here's what you need to fix, and let's move on. I never want to be the guy from American Idol, though, whatever his name is, who's just known for being a jerk. Yeah. Because I feel like, well, yes, I'll get more clicks if I do like a dramatic, this is burn it all. I'm never going to go out of my way to do that. If it's earned, I'll do it. But there is a bit of a I need to then look this person in the eye thing.
Right.
And I know there's authors out there who don't want to talk to me. That's fine. Um, I know for a fact there is at least one or two who have just blocked me on Twitter. I have no contact with them, and that's fine. And that's all right. I'll move on from that. They can do their thing. I'll do my thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's too many books out there for me to, I mean, just being pretty frank, like for me to usually give people a second shot. I mean, I'll be like, okay, I kind of saw your thing, and you're probably going to get, okay, maybe it was your first book. You know, you can have some missteps, but like I kind of see what your thing is. I mean, your general trend here is this, and if it's like that's not for me, I'll be like, okay, great. This book is not for me. Doesn't mean it's a crappy book, although sometimes it does. But quite often, I think that's something that I wish reviews would take into account. Like, this book wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't like boys who are 15 years old. And here, the boys are 15 years old. Oh my God, they act 15. Okay, great. Put that on the shelf. Fine.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't like middle-aged men who just study their navels. Okay, there are a whole bunch of books you can just put up on the shelf and be like, that's for somebody else.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's terrible.
Right.
So that is something I try to do. I try to, and that's what I'm doing right now, or that I hope to do in this section of my career where I'm kind of between getting really deep into the next book. Between finishing this book and getting into the next book is I like to try to read outside the genre.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'll sit there and I'll go, you know, what is it about Dan Brown's books that really works so well?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Da Vinci Code sold crazy. Some of that is marketing phenomena. Some of that is like, oh, everybody's reading this, everybody's talking about this, so I need to read it because I'm left behind. Like, that's success piling on success. But there's a book at the heart of that. Or Nora Roberts' books. Man, she's sold hundreds of millions of books. She's doing things right. And so I like to jump over into other genres and see what people are doing, because I find that kind of exciting. You go, wow, like David Baldacci. I just read a book of his, name's not coming to mind. And it's like, man, the thriller writers, their structure is so on point.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the characters maybe not that amazing to me, like they don't bring out that much to me, but boy, you've got stuff happening, you've got stakes going up, you've got, like, there are not wasted scenes in this book. Like, dang. And I feel fantasy could learn from those guys sometimes. I feel like I could learn from them, which is why I'm reading them, honestly.
Fantasy does suffer, especially in structure, a lot of the time. That is a fair criticism of the genre, especially with thrillers. I find they can almost be formulaic. So as a thriller writer, you have to learn how to use that to your advantage. It's branching out of books into movies. I just sat my girlfriend down and we watched Seven, which follows a typical thriller formula, but it does it so spectacularly you don't even notice or care. Let's not spoil that for people, but it's really, really good. And something you said earlier that I want to touch on in terms of, like, splitting the this isn't for me versus what is good here. Every good book reviewer I know on the platform will say, here are my subjective criticisms and here are my objective criticisms. And I try to differentiate between those as clearly as possible without being repetitive and just literally dividing my video into this is subjective, this is objective, because the worst reviewers out there are the ones who they say it's bad because I don't like, as you said, 15-year-old boys in my story, and therefore it's a bad book. And my response to that is no, therefore you're a bad reviewer because you can't figure out the difference. That drives me nuts, and I have to bite my tongue because I want to leave a comment that's like, no, insert Isaac Asimov's I, Robot is not a bad book. You just don't like classic sci-fi. There's a very distinct difference there that I think a lot of people, especially readers in general, not just reviewers, need to learn the difference of. It's huge. I mean, that is honestly, like, one of my biggest pet peeves now as a person, and I didn't have that before I started this channel.
Right. So how did you get into booktubing? How did you know what, I like doing this enough that I'm gonna try to just keep doing this. I'm gonna quit my day job.
So I originally I was okay. So there needs to be a little bit like a history of Daniel
Yeah.
moment. So don't mean to waste your time with this.
No,
I
no,
love fantasy
this
forever.
is your channel. We're talking about you. I'm turning it around. We're doing something
Okay.
different.
Okay. I love fantasy since I was a little kid. Like my dad was reading Harry Potter to me kind of thing. And when I was young, I found the Wheel of Time, which everyone who even knows my name knows I'm affiliated with that now to the point where people just will bring it up in conversation with me because they think that's what I always want to talk about, which I kind of do. You're not wrong. Um, and I had a college class where they said, make a viral video, try to make a video go viral, do the best you can, because I was a communications major. And so I made a Wheel of Time video, and it did okay. It got a few thousand views. I think it did the most views of anyone in the class. And I got a lot of comments saying, do more, do this, do that. And then I kept doing that because I am very malleable to peer pressure. And I transitioned from that into, oh, now YouTube's like, hey, you want to make money? And I was like, yeah. Um, and then I just kept doing it, and it's not the kind of success a lot of people affiliate with YouTube, where you have one video blow up and then you're set. I had a lot of videos kind of blow up and hit 100,000 views, hit 60,000 views in a day, things like that. But then you just decline back down. That's how YouTube works. You spike and then you almost reach where you were. And then, I just did that enough times that when it declined, it finally reached a point where I'm making decent money. I'm making cash, and now I have time to not be a software engineer and a book reviewer. Now I'm a book reviewer and someone who's pretending they're an author and writing short stories. So it's pretty much the whole story of how I ended up here, and it's made me realize that life is chaotic. No one knows what they're doing, and we're all just trying our best.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's yeah, that's a little terrifying there. Flying out there. Like, do you know other booktubers? Are you like a community? Are the conventions for booktubers? How's that work?
There are bubbles. Like I would say friends with like 6 booktubers. We know each other. We talk. We'll send messages, memes, jokes about other authors and stuff like or other booktubers and stuff. Nothing mean. We're all very nice.
Sure.
And then there's another bubble over there. We all like and respect each other, but it's very insular. And I imagine that's kind of the same with authors, where you may hang out with on the weekends. I don't know. Tolkien's son. I don't know what you're doing, but or grandson at this point. But there's always just I feel like in any kind of community that just happens. Bubbles form,
Sure.
and then you're aware of the other bubble, but it's rare for that to really clash.
Right. Okay.
And it's a good community though, and I know if you ever want to reach out to a booktuber, any of them hearing from Brent Weeks, they'll love.
All right. Oh, well, I'll work that connection for when Orbit has me launch my own channel.
There you go.
I'm just no, I would. Oh man, I would never do. Okay, hold on. So I actually collected some questions from my fans for you. So I'm just gonna actually look away from the camera because again, I'm not good at this. I can't just. Okay, so Sam Mason 34 says, what I thought I slid that in right under the radar, and then you just laughed at me. What are some trends that you would like to see more or less of from authors?
I want to see more authors stop trying to imitate what they think works and write the story they want to sell. It may not be as commercially viable, but as a reviewer, it'll make me respect what I'm reading a lot more. The amount of Game of Thrones imitations I pick up now is just, now that's dead to me. Now this is just I saw one that literally had a guy in a live action picture in the front who they did as much as they possibly could to make him look like Jon Snow, to the point where he had like everything. And I picked up the story and it read just like Diet Martin. And I was like, no. Wow. And that, I know sometimes that's publishers pushing people to do that. I know sometimes it's just someone thinking they could find success. And a lot of times it's a straight up con where they think grandma's not going to know the difference between this and an actual Game of Thrones book, and they're going to pick it up. So that, that is my biggest thing, where if you are someone who's in a position where they're saying, ride this wave, please just try and make your own. Try to make your own wave. Definitely pull from your influences. That's great. That's fine. I encourage that. Right. But don't just try to be a wave rider. That kind of bothers me. And you can always tell.
I feel like you can tell when it's spray painted on. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this is commercial right now. I'm gonna add this to the prologue. And so there's this really gritty scene right at the beginning because Grimdark is really big right now, and you're like, but it doesn't fit the rest of the tone of the book at all.
Yeah.
and like don't do that. Like you just turned off the people who would love your book, which is you, which is what you like. And it's like a brighter kind of 80s fantasy or whatever. It's like, but you had this really grim torture scene to start the book out with, and it's like, oh, that somebody made you do that, didn't they? Or your own insecurity made you do that. It's like I feel like people who chase, and I don't know if it seems cheap coming from somebody who's had success, but like I feel like people who are chasing the trends, they're never gonna get their own success, or
Exactly.
very rarely. It's like, do your own thing and set your own trend. Like that's the blue sky out there for you to jump out there and find readers by the truckload. So
Yeah, and the way I view it is you could catch a little bit of that wave. You could make a few nice $1,000s and catch a little bit, but you'll never be as successful as the guy who started that wave.
right.
That's it. By the way, you hit on tone there as well. That is something else where, oh my God, consistency of tone is something people need to learn. I appreciate in Lightbringer, you establish tone early and it is consistent. There is, mild spoilers for the first book. There's a pyramid of heads. And it's like, we're going this route. And we stay in that lane for the whole series so far. There's lighthearted moments, that's fine. But it's never like I've read 100 pages of a kid's book and now we're switching back. There's a consistent, this is an adult story. I'm not going to name names, but there's one book I have a very negative review on my channel where it went from like very normal fantasy and then just took a dive turn into like BDSM. And I was like, what happened here?
I could probably figure out what that book was. Not a newer story, I'm gonna guess. Okay, we'll leave that alone.
Yeah.
No, I do think that it's important to, and I think I've done this in my books, but I think it's important to set, like, this is the kind of story you're getting into.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna let you know. Like in Night Angel, it was like, you know what? This is a brutal world, and it's gonna be brutal. So like in the first 50 pages, I am going to show it's gonna get as dark as it gets. And in like 50 pages into Night Angel, and I try to deal with it very tastefully, but it's like there's child abuse that's happening, and it's yuck. And it's like, I want to look at human evil, and I want to do that in a way that's tasteful. The camera doesn't need to be right there, seeing everything that's happening. But it's like, if this isn't for you, put it down now. I'm not going to make you wait until you're 600 pages in, and then you're going to hit that and go, oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
I think if people know, okay, this is a world with lots of killers and good guys die, this is what I'm in for. Like okay, then if you do that, there we are.
Right.
So
I will add a small asterisk that, of course, if it's part of the story where like suddenly this great evil is unleashed, there's going to be someone in the comments who's doing an all caps like, but actually, and I just need to address that.
I mean, certainly there are. There's no rules in writing. The only rule is that fans have to keep reading. Like,
that's true.
People have to keep turning the pages, and most of the rules that you hear cited are things to bolster that. And what I say that I don't care if the fan throws the book across the room, as long as they go and pick it back up afterward.
That's great. I love that.
And I'll have those moments of like, look, I told you guys it was dangerous here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think I'm not going to do certain things, because I'll do it. Like I was on a panel once, and people told me, like I'm sitting up there with, and this was like my second or third panel. I'm sitting up there with some science fiction, fantasy luminaries, and one of them says, "Never, ever kill the dog," and I'm sitting there going like, I want to kill the dog. I'll kill the dog if I want to kill the dog. And everybody else on the panel is like nodding their heads. Don't kill the dog. Don't kill. And I'm just sitting there going like, well, that ticks me off. So again, there aren't rules. Just do it knowing what you're doing. It's like, you know what? You're going to be totally surprised that you thought this was going to happen, and the guy and the girl aren't going to get married at the end. Like, actually, she dies, or he dies, or what have you. Like, it's really shocking.
Yeah.
Okay, but does that? I try to say I don't always give the reader what they want.
Good.
I give them, I try to give them something better.
So this is actually a really interesting thing that I've definitely have this theory, crackpot theory, conspiracy theory in my head, where memes can actually become part of the way things are viewed. And so what you just said in the "Don't kill the dog," so that's like a meme online. You know, oh, is this movie kill the dog? I'm not going to watch it. That's horrible.
Right.
And there's even a doesthedogdie.com as a thing. I'm about to talk about a classic book where a dog dies, and if that's going to bother you, spoiler warning for I Am Legend. That's one of the best emotional gut punches I've ever read, is in that book when the dog dies. And that book would not be as good. But now I'm seeing people who are actually saying like, oh, I won't read this because the dog dies. And I'm like, if you can't read something because a fictional dog dies and you're going to yell at authors not to kill a dog, you are wrong in every artistic merit I can think of. You should never tell an author or anyone along those lines not to push a boundary, not to go for the emotional gut punch if that's what they think needs to happen for their work to land. I 100% push against that idea, but there is now 2 instances where I've talked with you and you've mentioned killing dogs. At Jordan Con, you said the definition of high epic fantasy was dropping a book and it kills the dog.
Right. Yeah, the Chihuahua killer. Right. Yeah. I guess maybe that's the spoiler for the next book. Has a dog in it.
Well, now I'm terrified. And you also, I want to briefly touch on this because this is something I find you I'm not trying to butt kiss here, but you're one of the best villain writers I've come across recently. I don't want to get into specifics here because I don't want to give spoilers for who turns out to be a villain and who not. But I would love to hear how you approach writing villains for fantasy right now, because it is the best time ever for villains in fantasy. I feel like they're often the most interesting characters for series. Everyone from Ramsay in Game of Thrones to you have Dolores Umbridge in Harry Potter. Like, these people are arguably the best characters you can come across at times.
Right.
How do you approach, crafting your well-rounded, deep villain?
I have maybe a few tricks. I mean, one of the reasons that villains are easier to write and are often the characters that people really love is because the author isn't sitting there second guessing themselves. Like, oh, if I have, I mean, like think about this. I don't know that I've ever read. I'm surely I have. I don't know that I've ever read a main character in a fantasy novel who's a racist. We see lots of things, but there are things that we do not want to see. Maybe we see them too much in real life, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, you know what? That one pushes my buttons, or some authors. That one pushes my audience's buttons. There's no way I'm going to have my noble Highlander from Scotland have any biased viewpoints, or whatever it is. It's like, there's no way he's actually going to be the way a lot of people were in that society, or I'm going to protect that. Well, that's fine. I mean, you certainly don't have to write your heroes with horrible views, and not like I'm advocating heroes with horrible views.
No, I think that's a fine thing to advocate for, because it means they're more human. It means this is believable.
I mean, with Lightbringer, I really wanted to have heroes with blind spots. So there's things that their culture does that they go along with, and they don't really think about. It doesn't make those things okay. So it's not a big spoiler. But one of the characters just doesn't think about slaves in his society. He just doesn't think about it. They're just like, slavery's around. They're invisible to them. They don't look at them. They don't consider how they feel about things. And does that make him an a-hole? Yes, it does. But he doesn't see it, and we see things through his point of view. So we sort of go past those things. So we bring, as readers and as authors, we bring a lot of concerns that are directly tied to our own morality when we're writing our heroes or people that we really want you to connect to. And when we get to write our villains, it's like, we can do whatever we want. So it's sort of takes away one of the guardrails that keeps us from writing realistic characters, or can keep us from writing realistic characters. Like real people in real life have stuff about them that you go, man, that's kind of yucky.
Hmm.
Like I was just reading an article. I don't know if it was in the Times or something, but it, it was about India wrestling with some of the attitudes that Mohandas Gandhi had.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, he did some stuff that he said some things, he did some things that we are deeply uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But like it would be really hard to have like a saintly character in our fiction who does those things and be like, oh yeah, this thing, you find that deeply weird and troubling. I'm gonna force young girls to sleep with me to show how strong I am in my celibacy.
Hmm.
Um, is that girl able to consent to that? It's that's kind of squicky. Like
Yeah, it
what
is.
are you doing? And so there's a lot of care that we take as writers, and I think rightfully a lot of it. But some of it comes from cowardice.
Hmm.
Some of it is or not cowardice. Let me say some of it comes from fear of like, if people hate this main character, this other scene doesn't work, or people aren't going to buy the book because they're going to be like, oh, I will not read a book with an X in it,
Hmm.
with a bad guy main character.
Hmm.
So it's tricky, and our villains allow us to be like, here's a guy who's a jerk and you can hate him,
Hmm.
and I can build in some positive things about him. But I have the character you're probably thinking about. I have him say some of these lines, and I feel bad when I write them. like he will use his words to break people in ways that are just not fair, not polite, and just cruel. And it's like it's kind of fun to write that. So I think you're seeing a little bit of the author's glee of like just being like, oh wow, I built this three-dimensional character over here, and he is going to attack her at her weak point. What a jerk! I hate him. Oh, reader's gonna hate him too. Excellent. That's a nice emotional vein for me to go after. For me to mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that, because I feel like there's a fear now in internet culture where there could be, articles written like, well, the main character believes this, therefore the author believes it because he's the protagonist. I know there's also people who are afraid of that aspect of it,
Yeah.
where there's just, oh, he's advocating for slavery because his main character ignores slaves. And it's like, no, it's an aspect of the world and a result of this character growing up in it.
Right.
It would be completely unrealistic for you to have your main character go out of nowhere, wait, no, this is wrong. That's not how the world works. It's in modern society, one of the big blind spots people still have today is homeless people. I mean, we just eyes down, don't think about, don't look at them. It's the same kind of thing. And I'm sure I made a lot of people just clinch when they realized the last time they just ignored a homeless person.
Sure.
That's absolutely a reality of the way I think writing it can be censored. I think you're hitting a good point there.
Yeah, it's yeah. I was thinking of like housekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are like, I don't know if that person speaks my language. It's different people sometimes. I'm just gonna not talk to them. They are invisible to us if you do that. Not
Right.
everybody ignores them, but it's very easy for a culture to be like, that makes me uncomfortable. Americans don't know what to do with people who serve us.
Yeah.
Because we've got this culture that gives a lot of lip service and often does value, kind of egalitarian ideals. Bill Gates called himself a middle class kind of guy, and he wasn't joking. And culturally he might be really a middle class kind of guy, but like we all kind of try to dress middle class, and so we don't know what to do with people who serve us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, gee, what I kind of gave that to Kip. Like Kip is dealing with slaves, and he hadn't grown up in an area that has slaves. I'm trying to use Kip to give some light to the world, to give a different perspective, so that he has different blind spots than Gavin Guile, to show a little bit. This is not the author. Like let's use. They each have their own blind spots, but hopefully we can see a little bit more of things in 3D here. But he's got that feeling of like, what do you do with slaves? And he tries to give one of them like a tip. At one point, he's super awkward, and I kind of wanted readers to connect with that of like, what do you do when you confront injustices that are bigger than one person in your everyday life? Because giving $1 to a homeless guy isn't really going to do anything to him. But you're afraid, if I look at this guy in the eye, and if I acknowledge him, he might come up and want something from me.
Right.
And he might be, I mean, and there are real fears, right? Like he might be mentally ill. Which a lot of homeless people are, and I don't know how to deal with mentally ill people. So now I've got two things that are making me awkward, and I'm just trying to go to Starbucks.
Right. So, I want a frappuccino.
Right. So I think fantasy is a really great place to deal with some of those things without shaming readers, without saying, look, you should feel bad because you don't know how to deal with homeless people or you don't know how to deal with mentally ill people. Well, I mean, welcome to being human. A lot of us don't know how to deal with people who are really different than us. Yeah. But fantasy we can look at things from one step removed, and we can be like, oh man, that's really hard for them to deal with the injustices that they benefit from in their society, and yet still feel way bigger than they are. So how do they process that? And then, well, what I hope, sometimes that readers can abstract that to be like, how do I feel when I see injustices? Mm-hmm. So.
I love that because you brought up Kip briefly, and I find him to be a character whose blind spots are mostly internal. He struggles a lot with himself, and that was something that I really appreciated the time and effort and care there to show, the ways, the struggles that some people suffer from anxiety, like I do myself, suffer from social awkwardness, like I've put my foot in my mouth this morning. So some of these things that do, really make characters feel more real and human and well-rounded, because I'm so glad the age of the perfect man protagonist, the Doc Savage type, is gone, because they're the most boring reads on the planet. Right. I'm so happy we're in the age of this character can't realize they're really good at this and also is terrible at these 5 things. Right. That's much more compelling, because how's he going to beat the big evil wizard? You know what I mean? The guy who can't talk to a woman, how's he going to go and fight the end of the day's destructor? Right. I don't know. Like, I love Aragorn, don't get me wrong, but I don't find him nearly as compelling as a lot of the characters we're seeing now.
Right. Yeah, I want to have characters who are, they're interesting because they are larger than life. Like, there's things that they do that, like, that's amazing, and yet they also have these spots. It's like in Night Angel, it was like Kyler is a lopsided character. Because what has he done for his whole youth? He's trained how to be an assassin. He doesn't know how to handle social situations necessarily. It's like, so you could look at that and you could be like, oh, that's so inconsistent. Like he's awkward talking to a girl. It's like, yeah, because all he does is work out.
Yeah.
Like, he talks to nobody. He gets no practice because this is all he does. And he's always with his master, and he's always figuring out how to fight, and he's always doing these things. And so, at 18 years old, it's like he hasn't had that much time to practice anything else. So I like the idea of the lopsided characters who can be really good at a few things, and then other stuff they're terrible at. To me, it makes them a lot more fun and interesting to write, and true to life from what I've seen.
Kylar reminded me of one of my good college friends so well, because he was a guy who went to the gym twice a day, incredible shape guy. And at a party, he had a girl, it was a Halloween party, who was dressed as a cop, put a handcuff on herself and him. And at the end of the night, him and my friend were like, my friend and I went up to him and were like, you realize she was flirting with you, right? And he was like, really? And I was like, dude. So yes, it is very human. It is very real.
Right. I just had a thought back to the slavery thing. I've had readers tell me they won't read my books because there's slavery in them, and wow. It's an awkward thing. I mean, it's like, oh, so the cannibalism was okay. Like, incest was fine, but slavery was beyond the pale. It's a funny thing, but at the same time, I get it. I mean, certain things, and the legacy, like when I was reading up for this, for the Lightbringer world, it's like I wanted to really look at the Mediterranean. I wanted to look at different kinds of slavery, because slavery has been practiced a lot of ways, all of them horrific, but in different ways. And we think of chattel slavery as has left such awful scars in the U.S. And around the world. But like I wanted to examine some things that were very different. But I get it when readers are like, I hit this, and it's this kind of injustice just makes me crazy. And people not seeing this injustice that I care about, that makes me angry. And so this book isn't for me. And like I get it, and it makes me sad because I feel like ultimately you and I agree. Right. Trust me a little bit, but I get it at the same time. It's like why should I trust random author to walk me through this? Right.
There's the way I view that is art should be allowed to transcend all social lines. It should be able to examine everything. That's the point of art. And individuals are allowed to say, okay, I don't want to cross that line though. Right. Perfectly allowed, but you should never yell at the person who did make the whatever, that did examine that, because that's how we grow. That's how we change. I mean, there are books that have changed lives. There are plays that have, I'm sure, inspired huge political change, because that's how we as humanity communicate in cultural ways, through works of what have you. Whether it's, some artists like to go the cut off their ear route, while others ones like to make change and make themselves known through examining culture.
Right.
There's the crazies, and then there's the insightful, and there's a lot of overlap.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to keep you too much longer here. I know you're a very busy guy, but I did want to end on a final question, where you worked as a bartender for quite some time, correct?
Well, I worked just for about a year. A year. After I graduated college, I was like, I want to do this writing thing. I need to put food on the table somehow. So I wrote days and worked nights. Okay. And then I moved out to Oregon, where there was this girl out in Oregon, and seemed like maybe that there might be something there. There might be a future there for me. And so I moved out to be near her, and I got a job as a teacher for a year. So I was a high school English teacher.
Wow.
Yeah, that was. I loved the kids way more than the parents.
And I have heard that from everyone I know who's a teacher.
Yes. So and then we got married. And Christy decided to support me, which it was amazing, but very hard. And then 6 years later we got published. So
nice.
That was my path in short.
Well, that makes my question seem so much more shallow in hindsight, but I was going to ask what your go-to drink is.
Well, I mean, somebody right before we rolled the cameras was telling me about Long Island iced teas. So I won't bring up that story since it's quite embarrassing, and I don't recommend any of your fans bring that up to you on every occasion possible. But it had to do with a yarn of twine and 3 Polish sausages. Okay. So you could just don't ask him about it, though. Very embarrassing. I did like to experiment at the bar, which is sort of like that was one of the fun things of making of just experimenting and making fun drinks for people after hours. Of course, then you make these drinks and you're like, how did that go again? Because that was after hours and we had 3 of them. So it's been a lot of water under the bridge. Water, not booze, under the bridge since then. So I mean, these days, I will go with I like the Macallan 12-year, which actually I like better than the 15-year. I haven't had the 18 because that seems like a lot of money to spend on booze. But yeah, Macallan is probably my favorite tipple. So how about yourself these days?
I am pretty much as easy as it goes. I just go with a dark and stormy ginger beer with some rum. I'm good to go. And as
Nice.
someone who worked in a distillery for a while, I can tell you that a 12-year is perfect because if you age it longer than that, you're not really increasing much. It's just fancier.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So how long did you do that?
About a year. So right around you being a bartender was me working in a distillery as a fresh 21-year-old, and everyone asking me, "Can you drink?" I gave tours, I did all kinds of stuff, but everyone would just ask me right away as soon as they came in, "Are you someone's kid?" Or,
Imagine that got old after a while.
oh, yeah, yeah. Um, all right. Well, if you have not checked out Lightbringer already, there will be links to check it out in the description down below. Be sure to pre-order The Burning White. This is a read I am so excited to get through. I may have already started it, and I'm holding it. Duh, I started it.
Right.
And thank you so much, Brent, for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that.